Hello and welcome to the Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. I'm your host, Dr. David Hardy. And today on our show, we've got another amazing guest. He is a functional neurologist, an Instagram sensation, and an old colleague and friend that I've been looking forward to reconnecting with. Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Nathan Keiser. How are you doing there?
I'm doing great. So good to see you again. As you said, it has been some years since we've been able to see one another. So this is it's really great to be able to see you again.
Absolutely. Now, for people listening in, we first met when I was a student in chiropractic college and taking the functional neurology and the fellowship in brain injury courses. Some of those courses alongside Dr. Keiser and some from him. And like it was just an amazing place to be. At that point in time, like Dr. Carrick was treating Sidney Crosby and all the star NHL players and all these athletes and just all these bizarre neurologic cases. And like so many, not even home runs, but grand slams that are like
Sure.
unfathomable. And yeah, just looking back, kind of that um, early days, like 10, 20 years ago now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of what's one case or something that sticks out in your mind that just got you hooked in this realm of functional neurology?
That's a great question. So yeah, I came to it a little bit earlier, and my first entree was actually in seeing. I had a friend that was sick, and this is back in. I've told this story before, but in days where the internet was not what it is now, like you couldn't stream video back then. So I'd come across this description of a recording on PBS that was a doctor that had gone through these case studies, and it was amazing. So I ordered it. It was Dr. Carrick, and he's got these three kind of case vignettes that he's going through. And at this time, it was my last year of college, and I saw that. I'd never been to a chiropractor before, didn't know anything about it, was actually on a career path into prosthetics and orthotics. And
Okay.
I saw that video and I was like, I got to figure out what this guy's doing. This is amazing. And then went to chiropractic school. Fast forward, went to practice, came back, was in Atlanta, and then had the chance to work with Dr. Carrick. And you're just seeing these things live all the time, and just amazing. And most of them are cases in the early days where my first impulse back then was a lot of like, seeing things that were impossibly bad and wonder,
Yes.
seeing people whose, you look at their eyes and they just can't stop moving. They're having, clonic attacks. Like there's just no quality of life. And you're looking at this going, how in the heck, where do you even start here? And then just watching him go in and go through and methodically start to, it's, kind of like untying a ball of yarn, just methodically pulling string by string to figure out what was going on. And then one of the things that has resonated with me so much and still sits with me now is watching him take these cases that were, you don't even know where to grab a toe hold, but being able to unravel that and pinpoint, here's the one tiny thing we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on actually just moving their eyes this 1 inch up and to the left. And we're just going to do that. And we're going to watch for when they fatigue, and then we're going to stop, give them a break, and we're going to do it again. And just methodically and almost like unrelentingly focused on the smallest piece, and just watching, that person start to breathe normal again, and then their eyes start to corral again, and then they can walk again. And you're just like, all we've been doing is just this one little movement, like 4 times, and then we take a break and then doing it again. And just watching that and living through that and experiencing that as you did, you realized it made me realize so much of what we think about in healthcare is trying to move a mountain, but we actually have to just start with what is the one smallest thing that we can get the most leverage on. And that continues to be like at the core of every thought I have clinically to this day.
Wow. Yeah. And it is like mind-boggling that like regular healthcare hasn't come across how to treat these complex cases. And you mentioned, yeah, they're looking for something big to like stabilize a pathology instead of kind of these little tweaks that can be built and start for the system to rebuild itself. And yeah, the results are out of this world. And like people were flying in all around the world. And like in your clinic now, you have people coming from other places. What's the farthest they've come to see you?
Yeah, we're super blessed to be able to serve a lot of people. We see people from, I mean, I'm in Michigan in the United States, not so far from you. You're like a really like
It would be
decent car ride, right?
with a couple stops.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
can't make it in one tank of gas. But I would say so. We see people from all over the U.S. I'm thinking about people that are in the clinic right now. Um, the whole country. Lots of people come from Canada. Obviously, we're easy to get to from all parts of Canada. But then even we have someone in from the Netherlands right now. We have people in from Australia. We've seen people from New Zealand frequently, Australia frequently, throughout Europe. Claire just got off the phone with somebody from Switzerland, and so it's a wild place to be. What it teaches me is we have so much room to run in terms of um, trying to help more people be helpers.
Right.
Usually in the case of thinking about doctors and how do we obviously we've been doing it long enough now to where um, it's reasonable to say like we're doing well at it, and so that's wonderful and a blessing in and of itself. But then the next part is like, how do you
I
make
would
that
say
more
that's
well known?
very humble.
How do
Doing
you just
well. Yeah. You're knocking
well
it out of the park, Nathan.
I appreciate you saying
Yes.
that, but I mean, these are
Complex
not to
cases.
overstate it, but it's like it's people's lives, and it's
Yes.
for the most case, if you can imagine being in Europe and saying like I'm going to spend more money than I have ever spent before to fly across the ocean to a place I've never been in hopes that I can work hard to be able to get my life back. Like that's a lot of friction for someone to go on faith. So we take that pretty seriously, and so we're trying to make sure that we don't have missteps, and that's really helpful because what it does, it teaches you how to not have missteps, and then we can share that in our team. And then is there a possibility then that helps us to be able to share that so that people don't have to take that big trip and they don't have to um, have so much faith and have so much invested in that and actually be able to connect with people that are closer to them. And there are people that have our credentials that are closer, and everybody's just got different talents, and we just happen to be really focused on one small group of people. But what I would love to see is that small group of people be able to get help anywhere on the planet, which would be that's kind of like
Absolutely.
the big goal. So
So with that being said, like you've built up a reputation, but when you're starting or some of these newer docs starting in this field, how do they actually describe something so big, complex as getting people better from, say, their eyes shifting and moving all over the place and their body jerking around or them passing out? How do you quickly explain functional neurology and like when people say describe it in one sentence? What's your response to that?
oh man, I'm going to give you the honest answer. This is my 17th year in practice, and I would say that question comes up on a daily basis, and I would say
Yes.
I still don't feel like I am great at answering it. I think most of the time I'm describing it just as lukewarm as possible in terms of just trying. We help people that have brain injuries, and I think that that doesn't really describe it at all. But so that's why we actually that's why we set out a few years ago, because that was hard. And because we're having to describe it to so many people, we set out to create a library on YouTube that was basically, we need all the conversations that we have through the day, all the questions that patients ask. Let's try to get as much of that available for free online so that people can learn about it ahead, can go and spend the time, learn about what we're doing so that they have a more broad understanding. And I think that that's been useful. I don't know, but I think so. But just to give people, because it's not a one sentence answer. We're not doing the thing that is conventional. I actually think the closest thing that describes it is somewhere between, like, learning math in school and then learning how to exercise. It's like somewhere in between those two metaphors, right? Where you're trying to get a dose that, like, you can't do calculus before you do algebra, and you can't do algebra before you do arithmetic. And so there's this hierarchy of function that exists within pathways in the brain. But then at the same time, there's a dose that you can tolerate. I have my 6-year-old right now is doing math, and they go to an AI school. And so it kind of walks them through step by step. And I mean, you can see, like, there is a point in a 6-year-old where there is no more math that is going into that brain right now. It needs,
Right,
like, some rest and
exactly.
recovery. Right. And the same is true for all brains across any context, whether it's you're doing a bench press or you're playing rugby, or whether it's you're trying to recover a function. And if you're recovering a function, actually the threshold for what you can do, the dose, is profoundly low a lot of times. So you're actually starting at these super basic concepts and just, building up, grade by grade going up. So that's a long answer. I'm not sure if we even got close to what the original question was, but I think that's what makes it hard. Is that's not typically the way we think about health. It's not typically the way we think about pathology.
Right.
So it's really, yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a good question.
Yeah. So if I was to go through a list of these, you said kind of narrow set of conditions you work with. Um, and the laundry list is, well, post concussion syndrome, dysautonomia, vestibular disorders, migraine, dizziness, neurodevelopmental, chronic pain, movement disorders, injury, and balance problems. Um, Walk us through the math on some of these. Like,
Yeah.
what
So
what
in
is
my
the connection between all of those, and how do you start
that's a good
calculating
question.
things?
So those, when you list out all those things, what those are listed in the framework of how someone would classify themselves, right? I had
Right,
a concussion.
exactly.
I suffer from POTS. I have been diagnosed with some form of dysautonomia. I have a balance problem, right? So it's kind of like how you think about yourself to then go and interrogate the internet or to go search into the world. And so those things all, to me, actually end up in a bucket of, like, these are all different representations of how the brain can somehow be injured or have changes in function that may not be pathological from a, we have permanent damage scenario, like a stroke, like a tumor, right? So we're not in permanent damage. We're in more like it's not working right. And that's what all of those things have in common. But the gift in that is that because it's not working right doesn't mean it's permanent. But unfortunately, I think a lot of times the conversations drift toward, like, that's the way we understand it. But it's
Right,
not. And so all of those things, the common bond is that they're actually things that aren't permanent, that represent dysfunction in the brain, that if we can localize them, if we can understand the pathway, we actually have a methodology for being able to strengthen that pathway. The same as if you injured your elbow, there's going to be a pathway toward regaining strength and function in the muscles and joints and proprioceptors around your elbow so that you can start to use it again. So taking that kind of thing that we understand from this physical world here, but being able to apply it when it comes to actual pathways within the brain.
I love it. Now let's take something like POTS. So POTS, people basically they change position and they feel dizzy, lightheaded, and sometimes they do actually pass out. Or um, a lot of people would go, well, that's going to be a cardiac issue. That's something metabolic. Oh, have they had their iron tested?
Sure.
Like all these things that conventional mindsets and information out there fall short on. What actually is going on in these disorders? And geez, we mentioned moving the eyes slightly in one different direction to rehab things. Like,
Sure.
like there's a
Actually,
huge gap with people probably don't understand in that.
sure. I think the way you frame that is really good because, um, first of all, POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So, like you mentioned, it means that when you stand up, you have an abnormal response to standing up, and your heart has to take over and overcompensate for that, which means it starts to beat faster. And so then the question actually becomes like, why does that happen? Your point is a good one because the first things that you should check are, do I have anemia? Do I have a thyroid problem? Do I have dysglycemia? Like all the simple things that can be first, but they typically don't tend to actually like be as pervasive as you'd see in POTS. POTS is something that happens. It happens every time, like clockwork, for a long period of time. And so, the most important part that I harp on a lot, maybe to my own fault, is that it's named based on the compensation, meaning
Yes,
your heart
yes.
rate going up is actually the thing that's saving you right now. And but when we name it as like this is the problem, that's when we start to think about, well, maybe this is a heart problem. It actually means the only way you can get a POTS diagnosis is actually because you do not have a heart problem, right? And your heart is actually the thing that is
Uh,
coming in strong and is saving the day. And so if we step back on that and you just think really, really in a kind of simple way, you'd say, well, what would be the reason my heart has to beat faster? And what we come to learn is that when you research it, we have a test that we do. It's called a transcranial Doppler ultrasound that you put on the head, and it can measure the blood flow that flows through the middle cerebral artery, which is just kind of like the main trunk that goes up into the brain from your neck into your brain. There's one on each side. We measured them both. We can compare them. But what we find is that in many, many, many of these cases, when we're seeing that tachycardia, the blood pressure has to stay stable. Otherwise, it's a different condition. We call that orthostatic hypotension. They're all kind of cousins to each other in terms of why they happen. But if the blood pressure stays stable, but the heart rate is going up, what is that telling you? Is that the heart rate is going up so that the blood pressure can maintain its stability. So if you take away that heart rate response, what's going to tend to happen is the blood pressure is going to start to drop. And the way that we see that represented is actually a normal or the same blood pressure, but the cerebral blood flow decreases, which is kind of wild because you would
yes.
think like, man, shouldn't blood pressure just like be the same? Like make it easy on me. Head blood pressure should be the same as body blood pressure, but it's not. And it's not because body blood pressure, you're in this like open system. All the bones are on the inside, right? So the blood pressure can expand, and that's really useful because it helps us to be able to shift blood volumes around, to your gut when you're eating, to your muscles when you're running. But your brain is different beast because the bones are on the outside, because the bones are on the outside, we have to be very delicate with the amount of pressure in our brain. So we can't really afford to have high blood pressure in the brain. Otherwise, we start squishing stuff. That's when real problems start to happen, right? So we have to have a whole different mechanism to maintain the blood pressure in our brain. And everybody kind of knows that, but never thinks about it. Because if you go out and you just like, I'm looking out over, this field here. If I just sprint across this field, after about 30 seconds, my blood pressure, my heart's going to beat fast. I'm breathing really fast. My blood pressure is going up. But the blood pressure in my brain is relatively stable. And so that we just kind of take that for granted that it always happens. And so we're constantly trying to make sure we don't get too much blood in our brain. But in the scenario that we see with POTS or orthostatic cerebral hypoperfusion, which is like the cousin of POTS, but the heart rate isn't super high. These are all elements where we're seeing a drop in that cerebral blood flow in the brain. And the compensation that we're having is that your heart is kicking in to try to maintain as much blood flow as possible so you don't pass out. But that's why you feel dizzy. That's why you feel nauseous. That's why you feel lightheaded. That's why your energy is tough, because you're just not getting enough in there. And then so what we set out to do is really figure out, underlying that problem, what's going on. Is it something where it's a brain problem, visual problem, vestibular problem? Is it something where it's lower in the brain and the reflexes in the brainstem aren't working as well as they should? Or is it in the peripheral nerves, where we see peripheral neuropathies can't squeeze enough pressure from the blood vessels in the body, and we don't return blood back to the heart enough? So then it's hard to keep it going. We get pooling. Or in a ton of cases, especially since COVID, the actual reflexes in the blood vessels in the brain get really sluggish and they can't keep the control normal. And then as chiropractors, another really
Yes.
important one is when you injure your neck, or you got these bad postures, we can actually just structurally, mechanically compress the blood vessels in the neck. And then that can actually change the problem, because you got a blockage, like you got a blockage in the sewer line. So all of these different systems have to we have to interrogate all of them, rather than just say, like, let's give you a pill and hope it shoots it up there. There's all these
Exactly.
different systems that come in, and we have to check them all out. So that is why, I think that is why we've kind of been so focused on this niche, is because almost no one is willing to do that. You can go to people that may look at one piece of that, but it's really labor intensive and time intensive
Oh, it's
to expand and
difficult.
look at the whole process. So
And not just
that's
that,
where we spend our time.
it takes a long time to learn all these systems conditions. Am I wrong on that?
Oh, it takes a ton of
all
time.
of us
And
are still learning and studying and figuring things out. And with that being said, though, you mentioned the cousins, kind of these disorders or classic presentations that people aren't so aware of. What was a case where there was like overlapping presentations and things going on, that it was one you had to really sit down and figure out? Kind of walk us through, like, how that happened in your practice with a patient and the results you were able to get with them.
sure, I think most of the cases actually have these overlaps, which is interesting in and of itself. But I can do one that we had just this week because it's fresh in my mind, where you'll see cases where history is really hard, because
Yes.
we think
Oh,
about things in recent history. We
patients.
got this recency bias,
Yeah. Well,
right?
I just want to interject right there. Like, most people who have these conditions can't explain what's going on.
Sure.
Like, there's not necessarily terms. And if somebody doesn't know what's going on, they're going to be mislabeled in the process.
Right.
And I imagine this patient went multiple places that unfortunately didn't pan out for them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of times, our first step is actually usually trying to unlabel people when they come in,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, like, if you're on the journey and you're trying to help yourself, fix yourself, you're going to take in as much information as possible, and that's great. But then you're trying to kind of use other people's words to kind of like retrofit what you feel, and you're trying to use those words to communicate, which is totally normal. And what we actually spend a lot of time doing is actually kind of getting rid of some of those words, and actually trying to get to, like, what are you experiencing? Like, just use your words. That's okay. And that's really helpful, because we talked about different diagnoses. Most diagnoses are kind of based on what people feel, what their presentation is. And in the world of chiropractic neurology, I would say that in some respects, not all respects, but in a lot of respects, in order to get to the outcome you want, you almost have to take all of that and put it over here on this bookshelf, because what you're actually focused on is what is the mechanism underneath it. And so the naming that we get from how we name them in the world doesn't necessarily correlate with what is actually wrong. What is the mechanism? So example of that would be, we get somebody that comes in, kind of starts out of the blue, right? But we're in a post-COVID world. We're in a they're 20-something kids. So, we've had sports injuries and a car wreck and, working out and been sick and had strep and, everybody, there's a question mark of everybody about whether or not you've had Lyme and if that's the problem or if you got mold. So there's all these things in the world. But in this case, it's someone who you can see these loops where we for sure have a focal injury in the brain because we can see these hemilateral problems in the way they move their body that's only on one side. When we measure the cerebral blood flow on that particular side is cut in half, which is
Wow.
not what you hope for. But then also on top of that, when they move their neck, we start creating these cuts, we call them, but it's compressions of the arteries that restrict the blood flow as well. So you turn your head, to the right, and it cuts the carotid system to the left, and then that drops the blood flow to the left side of the brain. But then you turn and go the other way, and the same thing. And so not only do we have this brain injury, but on top of that, we also have this movement error in the neck that whenever he's moving his neck, he's also kind of choking himself in a way. And you can see that in his vision. You can watch, you turn your head and his vision will go dark. And so those two things are overlapping. And that's, if you step back, that's kind of reasonable, because if you have someone that's had, a car accident, a whiplash, or, playing football has injured themselves or whatever, falling out of a tree, it's not unreasonable that you can have elements of an injury in the brain and elements of an injury in the neck. And then those two things over years create this weird mix of how they respond to each other. And so that's super common. But you just start by, number one, like, we can't have them do a lot if they're choking themselves every time they turn their head, right? So if you're walking around like there's someone holding you around the neck, we got to solve that first. Otherwise, it's super hard to do any rehab because you're always kind of choking. So number
Right.
one, we have to start there, which
Mm-hmm.
is not what you would typically think about in a neurology, like in a chiropractic neurology paradigm.
Yes.
But we have to open that up so they can move, so that we can get blood flow in. And then once that clears, then we start working on how do we actually start to stimulate that brain in an environment where we're getting enough blood flow so we can stimulate the neurons to push them forward. So that's kind of the constant battle, because anytime you're thinking about someone that is showing you that the thing that brings me to your clinic is that I can't get enough resources to my brain, the first problem is how do we solve for the resources to the brain, but then exist within that environment. So most of these cases are actually multi-step processes of problem solving that way.
Wow. And where are you at with treatment with this young athlete who's got a brain injury and whiplash neck causing the
So this one's
arteries
only been a
not to
couple days
flow?
in. We're I think the third day in, but yesterday we had a retest. So you'd like this, David. So we take that Doppler, and after we do the tilt test, what we do is we actually have them turn their head, and we look at changes in perfusion when they're moving their head, all the different ways, forward and backwards, all the things. And then we'll have them do it dual tasking, and we're looking for these cuts. So step one is we retested yesterday. We can do all those movements now without cutting off the blood supply, which is fantastic, right? And then so today is the first day that we'll now go in and start adding in some activities that are going to stimulate that portion of the brain. So we're going to do, based on that vestibular system and the neck and the way that they contribute to each other, we'll do those neck exercises, and then we'll start to add in a vestibular stimulus where we're using a whole body rotation chair, and we're going to start using some pulses to stimulate the inner ear so that it matches our new signals from the neck. And so that's what we're doing today. And then we'll progress that until we can get him up and moving around, until he passes that tilt table, which he's on track to do that. And and then get them back into more complex environments again. So that's kind of the hierarchy for him.
Right. And you mentioned we're only 3 days in.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of the patients you've seen, a lot of them are coming in with issues that have been there for years, if not decades. And in 3 days, you've already mentioned we've got blood perfusion into his brain. And like, that's another amazing thing that we don't commonly see in traditional healthcare reimbursement models, is
Sure.
that you don't work with a patient multiple times per day to get them quickly fixed. It's maybe once a week, once a month. If you're seeing a specialist, you're waiting a long, long time, most commonly. And with this, your timeline is that, yeah, we'll have him back in complex situations probably within what, a week or two?
That's our goal. Yeah. And that's this good interview question, by the way. You're a very astute interviewer. You
Well,
are.
thank you.
That's really good. That's a really good point. Yeah, that's our goal. Is we try to isolate it and move it quickly because you can control for variables that way, and you can move faster, so you can iterate a lot faster. And our goal is to get people to autonomy as quickly as possible. And we're usually, in a case like that, we're looking at a couple weeks to be able to get them to autonomy, get them back home. The process isn't over, but it's at
Right.
least to the point where they can start to take ownership of it themselves, use us as a support from a distance, and then that way we can keep them moving, but not necessarily keep them isolated out of their own world. We want to get you back into your world so that in itself becomes strengthening too. So yeah, we're working on a tight time scale. Maybe we're too hard on ourselves with trying to do that, but I do think it's really important. I think speed really matters. Anybody
Well,
who's not been
well,
well.
yeah, even in conditions where people haven't responded that quickly in time, seeing results in a short period of time gets people motivated to stick to a plan, exercises, at home programs, versus the, okay, well, here you go, here's some exercises, they might help you. I've never seen patients stick to that.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And yeah, because imagine it's been a couple years. You've gotten your hopes up going into the doctor's office. They're going to figure out, they're going to know what this is. They're going to fix it. It's going to be great. And then you just let down over and over and over again. So that starts to become your reality, right? So that
Right.
your experience, your evidence has been nothing's budging this. So if we want to get people to start to see a compelling future where they can start to picture in their brain what their life looks like healthy again, we have to start giving them evidence that it can happen.
Right.
And that helps not just to be able to say, like, it's going to work, keep doing it, but there's something about, you work in health coaching, you work in this place where we have to be able to see that future that is compelling, that we can see it happening in order for us to be able to move toward it and to have the motivation on the hard days to keep moving toward it, because you've got now some evidence behind you that, number one, you're capable. It is happening. I just have to keep going. And so for me, that speed, being able to measure it, provide that evidence is crucial, because that's what helps people embody that, like, oh, this isn't permanent. I can change. It's up to me now. I've got a plan. I got to start working toward it. And that's what gives us the ability to let them go home. Because if they can't do it on their own, what are we doing? So that's
Oh, exactly.
why autonomy is a
Yes.
goal.
And I like how you said early on in this last question that, yeah, people get hope. They see things. And like, I always remember like the early days, the attack. Oh, is this a placebo effect? And I'm like,
Sure.
if they've seen like a dozen other clinicians throughout their years of suffering, they don't have much hope left.
Mm-hmm.
They're just clinging on to maybe this time. And it's almost a habit, like, okay, well, cross that person off, next one. And like it's defeating, and like the strength of the patients is, it just blows my mind how they've been able to deal with what's going on and for so long. And yeah, just even a little nugget of improvement is like you see the excitement and life come back into them, and right there in front of your eyes.
That's a great point. And yeah, because we're all, I mean, we're all people. We just have this, you put your uniform on as a doctor to go help, but you're really just the same as you'd help somebody change your tire on the side of the road or make them dinner if they couldn't, get up. I mean, that's what you're doing. And what we see in them is the same things we see in ourselves. And one of my things we talk about all the time is, so we have an interesting clinic in the sense that it's open. So we don't
Right.
have a reception area, which wigs a lot of people out. It just is like a living room you hang out in, and then the whole space is open, and so we all get to be there and feel the feels together. And I like that because it lets me see everything that's happening, and I can kind of keep an eye on everything. But one of my favorite things is when you have people from all over who come in and everybody's got their glasses on and their headphones on and they feel terrible, you know, and it's just like they're doing the best they can just to be there. And it goes from that to, you know, people talking and making puzzles and going to lunch together. And like you can feel like the energy in the waiting room come alive and hear the chatter.
Right.
And like there's just nothing better than to see people do that, finding friends, coming from a place of being just alone and isolated to being able to like have a glimpse of what life looks like again, and to be able to just kind of eavesdrop on that is pretty cool.
It's amazing. Yeah. And yeah, all of a sudden I get memories flashback, goosebumps about it, and
Mm-hmm.
that keeps us going as well.
For
With
sure.
everything we've mentioned, you mentioned, yeah, needs to be more doctors out there doing this, and more clinicians, all sorts of different disciplinaries, of course. But what's holding functional neurology back, and where is it going, in your opinion?
It's a good question. Um, I think everybody finds it when they need to find it. Number one, and so I don't know that I want to think about it as holding it back, but what I want to think about it as is um, how do we the way I talk about it when I talk about it with my wife, who's also in the field, and with our team, is we haven't as a group made it undeniable yet. And so our job is to continue to work until our body of work becomes undeniable. And at that point, the famous tipping point book, at that point, then it will warrant people coming to investigate, coming to figure out what is going on, and we will be ready for them at that point. So I think our job is to just keep working and getting better and expanding, growing our knowledge base in the moments where maybe we aren't as well documented and not as well seen, so that when our body of work becomes undeniable, we've built the muscle to be able to share it with everyone. So that's the way I choose to think about
Okay. On that point, then, because for all these patients, it is undeniable. Is
it.
it now just more, is it a political numbers game?
It's a good question. I think we have to be able to. So most clinicians are in a position where,
They're
and I could
private
be wrong, but my
clinicians, right?
perception is most people are solo practitioners, entrepreneurs who are focused on the clinical portion of helping people, which is exactly where they should be. And that is kind of competing against major university institutions a lot of funding, a lot of research money, a lot of minions, research assistants that are there to help document that whole system and turn that into peer-reviewed literature. So the big knock on what we do is that we don't publish enough, but the structures doesn't really support us being incredible publishers of our work because we just don't have the bodies to do it, the
Right.
workers, the
Yes.
capacity. So I think one of the things that, and this is just my thoughts, it doesn't mean anything, but my thoughts are, we, as I move into, a different stage of my career, is starting to think about how you create opportunities for physicians to offload the entrepreneurial side, to offload running the business side, and to be able to open up space so that we can document what we're doing, whether that's through peer review or whether that's through media, any of it. And I think that starts to open up the door to make that body of evidence so big that people have to pay attention to it. So we're at the phase of growth where we've been learning and executing, and now being able to grow big enough to where physicians can not only see and treat patients, but be able to share that and to be able to do it in a way that is up to par with the rest of the world. And as we do that, I think we're getting there, and we're taking steps in that direction, so that so people can see what we're doing. And I think what we've learned is once people see what we're doing, then it becomes quite obvious. The problem that we have is just nobody knows about us. Nobody knows about it. It's not part of the conventional thought process. So people are forced to go outside of convention to find us, and it just takes people willing to look for it. So that's where I think we are. We're in the stage where there's an opportunity for growth. I think we're coming on that quickly.
I love it. Now, you mentioned for people to seek out and find information, and you've got a ton of it. How do people find you, find out more about what you're doing, and the amazing resources you're just putting out into the world?
Yeah, we've made that a big focus on our time. So that's my second and third job is doing things like this. And but we've made a library on YouTube. I like YouTube a lot because it's searchable, so people can find things that are tied, like, more direct to what their needs are. So we try to just make as much known in that as possible. I also do a live stream. We typically do it on Thursday nights at 8:00 Eastern time, and we'll go on and we'll share current literature, things that are pertinent to our patient population, and then we take questions, and that really helps us be able to get a sense of what people are missing, what they need to know, where we can serve people, and we just keep doing that over long times, and maybe not even doing it well, but just keep doing it. So that's where we're at.
I love it, and you are doing it extremely well. So.
Well, we got, yeah, sure.
Absolutely. All right, so definitely reach out to Dr. Nathan Keiser and look it up on YouTube. And, well, of course, also stay tuned to the next episode of The Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. Take care.
Awesome.